welcome to the Incomplete Guide to Film podcast, where we're learning filmmaking together. I'm your host, Alex Pinnell, and today we're going to be talking about long-form storytelling. So this episode was actually supposed to come out on Wednesday last week, but I had some technical difficulties and lost the entire episode. So it's being re-recorded and coming out today, Monday the 7th, instead. Long-form storytelling is something that we're coming in contact with more and more, as there's more of a bleed over between film and television, where television is getting more cinematic. They're telling their stories in more of a movie form. When you watch a television episode today, you'll basically be watching a 45-minute movie that has a sequel next week. Where before, things were much less cinematic. You know, if you watch any TV shows from the 90s or anything like that, it feels a lot less like a movie. It feels like TV. And film is getting more serialized. We're seeing more cinematic universes. We're seeing more series. You know, we're seeing more and more that Hollywood is telling the same story for a long period of time. You know, they're telling stories with the same characters over a longer period of time than before. Because before, it seemed like a trilogy is all that you could get out of certain characters. You know, and after a trilogy, you're kind of done. But now we have film franchises with 12, 13, 20 installments. I think the Bond franchise has, but that's a long-running one. You know, and I don't think we ever really see more than 3 grouped together still with Bond. You know, someone will do 3 Bond films and then they're kind of done. A trilogy, again, even with a franchise with a lot of installments. So as long-form storytelling becomes more and more popular, it's important that we, as filmmakers, use long-form storytelling effectively. This means learning some things from television and also improving on some things that filmmakers have done in the past. So here are the 3 rules to successful long-form storytelling. Rule number 1, the cardinal rule of long-form storytelling is that every installment should be its own standalone story. You know, if you get to 12 installments like the Marvel franchise has, people start to get lost. When Ant-Man came out, we ended up going to see it in the theater with a friend who had never seen any of the Marvel movies before. And she was confused. It was not her, you know, that's not her genre. She doesn't usually watch things like that. But we ended up deciding that we were going to go, and she was along with us, so she went along for the ride. And it took her a minute to get her bearings, because so much has happened and so much is just taken for granted now when you show a Marvel movie, that she was a little left behind by the narrative. And that's even one of the more standalone films. You know, imagine if she had gone to see Age of Ultron without seeing an Avengers movie up to that point. She would have been really confused, right? And that's what is important with long-form storytelling. You don't want to confuse your audience. You don't want to leave your audience who just joined you in the dust, but you also don't want to annoy your current audience with rehashing the same story again. But we need to find some way for reminding our audience without annoying those who already know. But beyond that, the most important is to make your story, the season of the television show that you're making, or the film in the franchise that you're making, a standalone story where it doesn't depend on all that came before. It can stand on its own, and even if you've only seen that one, you can still watch it and you can still get into it. I think that the X-Men franchise does this very well, where each of the films in that franchise are standalone stories. They tell you what they need to tell you for that story. And their connectedness with everything else is important, but it's not essential to understand what's going on in that story. The second rule of long-form storytelling is to have a reason for it. Have a reason that you want to tell this story for a long time. I enjoy watching characters change over time. That's why long-form storytelling appeals to me. TV shows and long movie franchises, characters change over that period of time. Look at any long-running TV show, and you'll find that the characters near the end of the show are not the same people that they were at the beginning. For me, that's an interesting journey. That's something that I enjoy watching. I think the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise is actually a really good example of this concept, or at least the first three are. If you watch any of them stand alone, it's about a bunch of pirates, and it's specifically about Johnny Depp. It's about Jack Sparrow being Jack Sparrow and being a pirate. Yes, but if you watch all three of them together, it becomes a story of a man who didn't care about anything or anyone but himself. And then, as time goes on, he falls in love. He falls in love with Elizabeth. And he knows he's no good for her. And he knows that she loves Will, Orlando Bloom's character. So he saves his life, and he gives up the immortality that he desired, the untouchability of, being who Will is at the end of the series, at least, not the end of the franchise. He gives up something that he really desired. He wanted to be untouchable. He didn't want to have to worry about anything anymore. And he gave it up for her happiness. So really, it's him falling in love. It's him learning how to care for other people. And that's one of the reasons that I was so upset with the fourth film. Because the fourth film takes all of that character development that we've seen over the last three and throws it out the window for pre-franchise Jack Sparrow, where he's just, I don't care about anybody. I just use people for what I need them for, and then I'm done. And that's probably what it's going to be with 5. Yes, there is going to be 5, and it's still in development right now. Which brings us to the third rule. Be concise. Tell your story and get out. Pirates of the Caribbean would have been complete with 3 films. Now there's going to be 5. Back to the Future is perfectly complete with 3 films, and I hope they never touch them again. No remakes, no reboots, no nothing. Back to the Future stays the way it is. There are stories that can go on for a long time. Star Wars seems to be going into a really good direction, and Disney says that they're going to, well, according to their investor, they said that it'll be a viable franchise for 40 years. Which means that possibly we'll get another Star Wars film every year for 40 years. That's quite a lot. So, for now, it's going in a good direction, but we'll see what happens. Could that story go that long and still be good? Absolutely. Because it already has, technically. There's almost 100 books, I think, in the franchise that will never see the light of day again because Disney has already said that they're going to disregard all the Star Wars novels. Which makes sense because since some of them came out before the prequels, there's some disparity in certain events and certain facts. So it makes sense. But it already has gone over 40 years. Because they go from hundreds of years before episode 1 to 25 or so years after episode 6. And in between as well. So it's a franchise that could continue to stay relevant for the next 40 years possibly, if they do it right. Marvel is another one that could be very long running. They have storylines for the next. They've been going strong since. Well, Captain America originally came out from Marvel in the 40s, so it could be quite a long time before they run out of ideas because they already have this backlog of film ideas that they've been building for nigh on 100 years now. Getting pretty close to it. Now, will all those stories be interesting? Well, maybe not. We'll just have to see. So in conclusion, there are 3 rules to long-form storytelling. Rule 1 is every installment, every story should be able to stand on its own, but also be a part of the whole. Rule 2, have a reason for telling your story over several sequels. It needs to be a bigger story than will fit in just one installment. And 3, be concise with your filmmaking. Tell your story and get out. When the story is over, the story is over. And let it be over. Good day and good filmmaking.